today we are going to see about the basics of development. So let me consider there is a job application. So this is going to be job application form, job application. So here we have few fields. And here I have two buttons. Submit and then cancel. Name, qualification, experience, city. So I have these fields in a job application. So before applying for this job, I have to enter these fields and then I have to click on submit. So if you are implementing this kind of application, we'll see how it works in Salesforce. So I enter some name here, then qualification, experience, then city. I entered some values. When I click on submit, how this job application is getting submitted into the portal. So let's see in Salesforce. Now in Salesforce, this complete part, this entire part, we call it as UI, that is user interface. This form, we call it as UI. We have something called database. This will be there in every application. So to maintain the data. Now when I click on submit from the UI, this data has to be submitted into the database. So when I click on submit, will the data directly be submitted to the database? Means no, it will not be directly submitted into the database. Then how it happens? When a particular data is getting stored and getting submitted from the UI, then how it is getting submitted into the database? How this data can be inserted into the database? Between the UI and the database, we have something called controller. Controller is nothing but here we will write our logic. For example, if someone is submitting a job application form, so he consider he is submitting for Salesforce developer. So now, if he is submitting for Salesforce developer, he should have relevant experience in Salesforce. Then only he should be able to submit his form. So if there is a field like relevant experience, So only if he puts some value in the relevant experience, like 2 years, 3 years. So only if the relevant experience is having more than 2 years, his job application has to be submitted into the database. Otherwise, an error message has to be thrown saying that you You do not have the relevant experience required for this job. So an error message has to be thrown if it is not meeting the criteria. So this kind of criteria, we'll be setting it in the controller. So all our logic will go here in controller. So the validations, if the relevant experience is less than 3 years, an error message will be thrown. This kind of validations will be returned inside the controller. This we call it as logic. So all our logic will be returned inside the controller. When the user is submitting a form, this form will not directly go to the database. Instead, this form will be redirected to the controller. Here only the validations will be checked. If the validations are passed, then controller will pass the data to the database. Then only the data will be inserted into the database. Only the validations are passed. So here we are using in controller, we are using the language called Apex, which is a programming language similar to Java. So using this programming language only, we are going to build our controller. Controller is nothing but an Apex class. Then, if you want to develop this kind of UI, we'll be using Visual Force framework. Using this kind of framework only, we are going to develop our UI part. So this is for classical view. So we have something called Aura framework, which will be used to develop single page applications, which is also used for developing UI, but this can be used to develop single page applications, also called as spas. So this will be using in the Lightning modern UI development. So in our course, we'll be using Visual Force framework because we are going to develop classic pages, not the Lightning pages. So this is very advanced concept of Visual Force. If you know Visual Force very well, then you can go on learning Lightning, which is very similar to Visual Force. But here in Lightning, we'll be implementing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, AngularJS. Even nowadays, they are implementing Handlebar.js, Node.js, everything. So which is very advanced framework. So for developing UI, we'll be using Visual Force framework. Using this, we have developed this form. When the user clicks on submit, it will go to the controller where all the validations will be checked. Once it gets passed, then the data will be passed to the database, and then the data will be stored to the database. So this is how the data gets inserted into the database. So similarly, how to extract the data from the database. So there is a job portal like Naukri.com. So there are few fields. Like we have something called search, then cancel. Technology for which you are searching for the job and the city. So we have these fields. They enter the technology as Salesforce and the city as Bangalore. When I click on search, I should get the relevant jobs posted in the portal. So all the jobs should be retrieved here. So how it happens? So this is the UI part. This we will develop using Visual Force framework. So when I click on submit, when I click on search, it should go to the database. It should retrieve the related records. Here also, it won't directly contact the database. It will retrieve the records. Everything has to go through the controller only. So when you click on search, this will call the controller. Controller will navigate this to the database. So here also we'll set some validations, like if someone is searching for Salesforce and the city, so the job has already been posted only for city Hyderabad. So if someone is searching for city equals Bangalore, so there are no jobs related to this. So this is also a validation. So this will be checked in the controller. So if we have written some logic here, if the city is not equals Hyderabad, a validation error will be thrown here. So it is not required to contact the database. When there is no record, if it is not meeting our validation, then the error message will be directly thrown from the controller. So no need to contact the database. If the validations are passed in the controller, then only it will navigate to the database. So here the records will be retrieved. Finally, the records will be retrieved. This is how a search process will work in Salesforce. Any doubts here? So here we have something called MVC, Model View Controller. So model is nothing but the database. The database is being handled by the Salesforce company itself. So we can't view the database. We can't handle the database. Everything will be taken care by the Salesforce company itself. View is nothing but the user interface part. So here we are using Visual Force framework. So for modern UI development, we'll be using Aura framework. Controller, for developing controller classes, will be using Apex programming language, where all our logic will be written. This is the MVC structure. So logic is nothing but the controller class will be developed using Apex programming language, and UI will be developed using Visual Force framework. So using Visual Force framework, we'll be developing Visual Force pages. Now we'll enter into some examples. So these are basic examples. So only the development basics will be seen today. So here I have simply written integer a equals 20, integer b equals a plus 10. These are two statements. So what is an integer a equals 20 here? Let's see each of them in detail. So here integer is nothing but a data type. A and b are the identifiers or the variable names. 20, 10, these are all constants. Equals, plus, these are all operators. Then the semicolon, we call it as separator. So now we'll see them in detail. So if you want to write a statement, if you want to create a variable, we need a data type. The first thing is data type, integer. What does it mean? This we call it as data type. So what is a data type? We need a data type to define how much memory is allocated to a variable. So we will define a variable here. If you want to create a form, we first need a variable. So we have seen here, we have seen name, qualification, experience, city. These are all, we call it as variables. So this is not constant. It depends on the user who is entering value. These we call it as variables. These names will be, these values belong to these variables will be changed. Depends on the user who is entering value. So if you want to create this kind of form, you first need a variable. So first it will define how much memory is allocated to each and every variable. Then what type of data you are going to store. If you are going to store a number, we'll be using integer. If you are going to store some characters, we'll be using string. Then if you are going to store true or false values, we'll be using Boolean. Like that we have many data types. Then what is the range of data? Now we'll see one by one. So we have few primitive data types. These we call it as primitive. The first one is integer. So we have seen integer a equals 20. Here what is an integer? If you are going to store a 32-bit number without decimal, then go for integer. For example, experience, age. If you want to store such kind of data, then go for integer. If you are going to store 64-bit number without decimal, then go for long. So this is how a range will be defined. Range of data is defined by the data type. Then if you want to store salary, then go for decimal. Salary will be in decimal. So go for decimal. 32-bit number with decimal. If it is very high in range, then go for double. 64-bit number with decimal. If you want to display true or false values, then go for Boolean. So here I have given an example. Integer x equals 10. Integer is a integer here. If you want to store 32-bit number. So here the data I stored is 10. So I have taken integer. Similarly, for 20, I have taken another integer. Now I want to display the result only when x is greater than y. When x is greater than y, the result will be displayed as true. Otherwise, the result should be displayed as false. How to implement this? So you are going to display true or false values. When you want to display true or false values, you should go for Boolean. So I have taken the data type as Boolean. Then the name of the variable. This is also a variable result, which is going to store the result displayed from this operation x greater than y. When x is greater than y, true will be assigned to the variable result. Otherwise, false will be stored in this variable result. So here it is false. So the result is having value false in it. Then we have date, time, time. So we have many data types. If you want to display the date, we'll be using date data type. Date followed by the variable name, which stores the value. So I have taken the variable name as DOP. So here I want to store a date format. So in Salesforce, how to create a date? So this is the syntax. Date dot new instance of year, month, date. So 2018, February 22nd. This is going to be the date. So I want to store along with the time, then go for date time. So date time, the variable name I have taken as dt equals date time dot new instance in year, month, date, then hours, minute and seconds. 8 hours, 19 minutes, 50 seconds. If you want to display only time, then go for time data type. Time t equals time dot new instance of 8 hours, 19 minutes, 50 seconds. Then if you want to display a normal text, then go for string. So here you should use the quotes. Within the quotes only, we have to give the characters. So if you want to store name, city, like that, then go for string. Then, so in Salesforce UI, we have seen for every record in UI, you can see a 15-digit ID. I open this record. You'll be seeing 15-digit ID here. So if you want to use this ID, then we'll be going for the data type called ID. So if you want to store 18 character ID or 15 character ID. So this is the 15 character ID. But in coding part, we'll be converting this 15 character ID into 18 character ID. That I'll tell you how to change it. So if you want to store 18 character ID, then go for ID data type. So these are all primitive data types. Then we have something called S-object data type. So let's take an account record. If you see here, there are different fields, account name, account number. So like that we have different fields. If you want to store a value in account name, this is a normal text. So you can go for string number 9. You can go for string data type. When you want to store account number, you can go for integer or long. So here we have multiple fields. So we can't, if you want to store an account record, you can't directly go for only one data type. Here you need, when you want to store account name, you need string data type. If you want to store account number, you need integer data type. So here we may need multiple data types. So for every field, we can't take a separate data type. Instead, what we can do is all the fields are related to a single record, which is called account. So if you want to store an account record, instead of going through all these data types, simply take an S-object data type. S-object is a data type. You can use this as a data type when you don't know which kind of data type you can take. In general, account, contact, opportunity, these are all we can take it as data type. When you don't know which data type you have to take, in that case you can go for S-object data type. So either you can select account as a data type, or when you are not sure it's related to account or not, you can directly take it as S-object. We'll see examples later. So if you want to store any type of data that is supported by Apex programming, when we are not sure about the type of data, then go for S-object data type. So the S-object means both Salesforce objects. It can be a standard or a custom object. Then we have identifiers. So first thing we have seen data type. Then we have A. A and B are the identifiers or variables. Now let's see them. So identifiers are nothing but names given to a variable, method, class, and interfaces. We'll see them in detail. So first one is variable. What is a variable? It's a name given to a temporary memory location where we can store data, perform manipulation whenever required. So what does it mean? So here I have given A equals 20. So initially I have set up the value for A is 20. In future, I may override the value. So here, I have taken A equals 20. In future, I may change this value. A equals 30. So here, this A value, initially we assigned 20, then we are overriding it to 30. So this A value will be changed. So this is not a constant, this value can be changed. So this we call it as variable, whose value is not a constant. it can be changed. It can be overridden. If I again give integer a equals 40, the final value it has is 40. These values will be varied. It is called as variable. So name given to a temporary memory location where we can store data. So here, if I want, so a 20 has been inserted into the database. So for example, let me, so we have a database. This is the database. Now in this database, I'm storing some value integer a equals 20. Then I have string s equals Salesforce. So I have stored these two values, 20 and Salesforce has been added to the database. Now I want to retrieve the data. I want to retrieve this 20 and Salesforce. In database, how to retrieve the data? If I directly search for 20, will it be retrieved? If I directly search for Salesforce, will the exact data will be retrieved? No. We don't know. There will be multiple values. For example, in account, we may have account number. Account number equals 20. Similarly, in contact, I may have contact number. So there also I may have 20. If I search for 20, which 20 will be returned here? Will it be related to account or contact? So I have to mention which data I have to return. So when you are storing data, instead of directly storing it as 20 in database, how it will be stored as a equals 20. Here, along with the variable name, it will be stored here. So a equals 20 will be added to the database. S equals Salesforce has been added to the database. So here, name given to a temporary memory location. This is the name given to a temporary memory location, that is A. So if you want to retrieve the value called 20, you need to retrieve it by calling A. You need to call A, not the value 20. When you call A, so here initially it is 20. I may in future I may override it with 30. So if I search as 20, will the data be returned? Now, so first integer a equals 20, then integer a equals 30. So initially integer a has been added as 20. Then I'm overriding it. Now it will be changed it to 30. There will not be 20. Now it has been changed to 30. But if I search as 20, the data will not be retrieved. So instead of searching the exact value, search with the reference variable, which points to the value. So when I search for A, the recent data will be returned. The recent data is A value is 30. So 30 will be returned. So we'll be using a temporary variable name. So this is the A is nothing but the reference name of the variable you are storing. So if you want to retrieve the related data, you need to call with the variable name. This variable we call it as a temporary memory location used to store the particular value. So here to store 20, we have used the temporary memory location called A. So A has been allocated in the database. So like this will be using the variable. So if you want to define a variable, we need to use lower camel case. That is nothing but the first letter should be in small. So if you want to define a variable name, the first letter should be in small. Then the second word, first letter should be in caps. So if you want to define a variable, define like this. For example, integer. So here I have taken a single character. but in general it should be at least 3 characters. Integer test. But if you are defining it as integer test contact, then the second word first letter should be in caps. That's what I have given here. If you are defining a variable, that should be in lower camel case, that is test variable. So we'll be seeing method and class in further examples. There, if you want to define a method, that should also be in lower camel case. The first letter is in small, then the second word first letter should be in caps. If you are defining a class, the first letter of every word should be in caps. Then, so we have seen integer and the a is nothing but a variable. Now we are going to see equals and plus, which are nothing but operators. We have multiple operators: arithmetic, logical, relational. So arithmetic is nothing but normal operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Use these 4 if you want to perform such operations. Then logic, if you want to perform and, or, not, then use double ampersand, double pipe symbol, not symbol. Relational operators for less than, greater than, less than or equal, greater than or equal, then double equals. This checks a data. This is to check whether a data is equal to a particular value or not. Double equals. So this is an example. When you give a equals 10, you are just assigning a value to a 10. You are value to a. You are assigning 10 to the variable called a. But when you use double equals, that means you are checking whether a equals 10. If it is so, it will return true. Otherwise, the value will be false. So this is another example. So I have a variable called experience. If the experience is greater than 5 and salary is greater than or equals 1 lakh, then it will return true. Only if both are true, only if experience is greater than 5 and salary is greater than 1 lakh, true will be returned. Otherwise, false. So this will see how this two works. It's a basic one, and or. If you are checking for 2 values and if both are true, true will be returned in AND. If any one of them is false, false will be returned. But in R, if any one of them is true, true will be returned. Otherwise, false. So we have seen the operators. Then we have constants, 20, 10. And then we have separators. So what are those constants? So here we have seen integer a equals 20. Initially it is 20. Then we are changing it to 30. Here only the values for this variable a is getting changed, not the value is changed. If we assign 20, 20 is 20 entire program. It will not be changed. 20 is a constant, 30 is a constant. Then here Salesforce is a constant. So these values are constant. Values assigned to the variable may be changed, but the values will not be changed. This we call it as constants, whose values can't be changed. So integer x equals 100, string s equals Salesforce. Here 100 and then Salesforce, these both are constants. So these are all separators, colon, semicolon, comma. We'll be using them in our examples. Then, so if you want to define, so here I have taken the variable name as x and s, integer x, string s. So while defining a name for a variable, we have some restriction. We should not use the keywords as a reference variable name. We should not use these kind of names to define a method name or a class name or a variable name. We should not use this. These keywords are given for a specific purpose. If else we have, then for loop, then void is a return type. We have static, final, So these are all are defined for a specific purpose. We can't use this as a reference variables. Now, here I want to print some data. So I have something stored in the database and I want to print the data. To print the data in the database, we'll be using system.debug statement. If you want to print some static data, just give it in the single quotes. For example, we'll come to Salesforce. So if you want to print some static text, just give it in the class system.debug welcome to Salesforce. So this data will be printed in the log. So you can view this statement. Then system.debug welcome to Salesforce. Then if you want to print some dynamic data, then so here I have a variable called string variable called course. String course equals Salesforce. Now I want to print this data. System.debug course you have selected. This is the static text we have. Course you have selected. Then I want to concatenate the value stored in the course variable. Whatever value is there in the course variable, I want to concatenate it with the course you have selected. In that case, just use the plus symbol along with the variable name course. So in the log, course you have selected as Salesforce will be printed. If you are changing value in course, that will be reflected here whenever you are trying to show this in a log. Here, this is another example. Decimal salary equals 1 lakh. So here, your salary. So this is a decimal I have taken. Just concatenate the variable name. So your salary is 1 lakh. This will be printed in the log. So this is a simple example I have taken. So I want to print some data based on some calculation. So here I have taken a decimal variable called cost. So I'm directly assigning some value, which is 5,000. Then number of books I have taken 4. So the cost of each book is 5,000. Then I have taken the number of books as 4,000. Then I have taken few variables. So here, if you are not assigning a value to a variable, and if you want to take the same data type for multiple variables, use comma. Decimal, discount, comma, price, comma, total. So here discount, price, total are 3 different variables we have of data type called decimal. Now I'm going to calculate the price. The price is of data type called decimal. So from next time onwards, you can directly take the variable name without the data type. So only while defining the variable, you need the data type. So I have taken the price. Price equals just calculating the cost into number of books. 5,000 into 4, which will be equals to 20,000. Then I want to provide some discount, 10% discount. 10% discount on the overall price. So price into 0.1, which will give you 10% discount. So the discounted amount is 2,000. Then I have another variable, decimal variable called the total. So I'm taking that total. So I'm subtracting price, I'm subtracting discount from price. So price minus discount, which will be 18,000. So in the log, I'm going to display system.debug. Total value has been calculated as, this is the static text along with the variable I'm going to display, total. So the 18,000 will be displayed in the log. Total value has been calculated as 18,000. So this is a normal operation using a simple multiplication. Then we have if-else statement. So here we have seen in keywords if-else. So if you are having multiple conditions and depends on conditions, if you want to execute a specific task, then go for if-else conditions. So here I have some statement 1. Statement 1, statement 2 I have, then I have if-else condition. If the condition is true, this here I have defined some condition. If that condition is true, then I want to execute statement 3 and 4. The condition is false, then statement 5 and 6 will be executed. At last, independent of this if-else statement, statement 7 and 8 will be executed. So, if the condition is true, what are all the statements will be executed? 1 and 2 will be executed in common. 1 and 2, 7 and 8. Then if the condition is true, 3 and 4 will be executed. So when condition is true, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 will be executed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. The condition is false, then 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8 will be executed. So now we'll see an example for if-else. So here I have taken some integer variables. Integer internal equals 20. Integer external equals 20. So I have directly assigned values. And then I have taken another integer variable called a total. I'm just going to calculate internal plus external. So this is going to be a total value. So here, if the total is greater than or equals 50, I'm going to display pass. Otherwise, fail. So in our case, 20 plus 20 is 40. 40, so it's going to display fail. This is how we'll use if-else statement. So here I have taken another examples. So I have taken two string variables called string name and city. Then integer experience I have taken, decimal, salary and bonus. I haven't assigned values for any of these variables. If the city equals, so here it is checking the value. We are not assigning the value. This is a logical operator. The city equals Hyderabad and experience greater than 5, then I'm going to display the salary as 1 lakh and the bonus as 50,000. For rest of the cities, I'm going to display the salary as 50,000 and the bonus as 25,000. So you are assigning the values for salary and bonus variables inside the if-else statement based on the conditions in the if condition. So till here we have seen just the basics of programming. So here, so before going for class, let's see how to implement this. So let's take this example and implement in Salesforce. So before going to implement this, go to your user detail page. Personal, then advanced user details. Here make sure that development mode and show view state in development mode, these two are enabled before you develop any code. Development mode, show view state in development mode. View state is a separate concept we'll be seeing in detail later. So only if you enable the development mode, you'll be able to develop your code. Then click on save. Then go to setup. So here So to develop the logic, we'll be using Apex classes. So from setup, search for Apex. So under build part, you will have Apex classes triggers. So click on Apex classes. So if you want to create Apex class, you can do from here, or under your name, click on developer console. So here click on file, new Apex class, Visual Force pages, whatever you want to develop, will be going through this. Now I have something called anonymous window. Under debug, open execute anonymous window. Here, if you don't want your code to be stored in the database, to be stored in the Salesforce org, if you want a temporary code, then write your code in debug, open execute anonymous window. Whatever code you write and execute here, this will not be stored in the database. So here I'm going to develop this code. So let me define it here, integer.
Priya, this is Vaibhav. Just one quick question.
Yeah, Vaibhav.
So Priya, in the very early stage, you also gave us one more link to log in into a developer account for Salesforce, developer.salesforce.com sign in.
Yes, and that is to sign up. That is to only for signing up.
Okay, so when I tried to log in from there, it gave me an error. So this is how you go into login by developer console, not through that link you log in, right?
You should go to login.salesforce.com URL if you want to log into developer edition. So we have seen, I think. So if you want to log into a developer edition or a production org, you need to go for login.salesforce.com. This is for production or developer org. If you want to log into any sandbox, go for test.salesforce.com. Is this your doubt? Hello?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, it is giving me an error, maybe some issues in the site.
When you are trying to log in from developer.salesforce.com, right?
Even login.salesforce.com is giving me error. Server not found.
Server not found. Oh, is this the first time you are trying to log in?
I had an account. I've been trying since morning. I'm not able to get in. Developer, it is want me to access my personal information, so I denied. So say refresh. Then when I tried going through login.salesforce.com, it is saying server not found.
How is that possible? Login.salesforce.com will work. See, it's working for me. Just check and take the screenshot if you are still facing the issue.
Okay, I'll try with HTTPS, not with Debug. Okay, thank you. Sure, thanks.
Yeah, okay. So here we are going to see this part. Integer internal equals 20. Integer external equals 20. Integer total equals internal plus external. If total is greater than 50, then display system dot debug as pass. Else system dot debug fail. So this is what we are going to display. Here you will find open log option. When you enable this option, whenever you are executing a particular code, using anonymous window, automatically a log file will be opened. If you don't select this option, a log will be added here. Here you need to double click and open the log. Then if you want to execute the entire code, then just click on execute. If you want to execute a part of the code, just highlight it and then execute highlighted. Now I'm going to execute the entire code. Just click on execute. See, the log is automatically opened. So here click on debug only. So this is the log, just click on debug only. So only the debug statements will be displayed here. So here I have given the internal as 20, external as 20. So the overall it is 40. Total greater than 50. It is not meeting the criteria. So it will come to else condition. So in else part we have fail. So the fail is displayed here. This code is not stored into the Salesforce org. This is for a temporary purpose. Like this, you can check for all the code in the execute anonymous window. Here, if I give if less than 40, then execute, display as pass. If I execute now, it will be displayed as pass. Select debug only checkbox. So it is showing as pass. So depends on the condition, it is going to display the values. So when you want to store the code in your Salesforce org, you need something like class. So if you want to store the code, you need to envelop the code in a class. So the class is nothing but a template from which objects are created. So we'll be seeing objects in detail. So before that, a class is just a template. So whatever we have written here, I'm going to add this in a class so that I can store this class in a Salesforce org. So example, we have a concept called the purchase order. So in every product-based company will be having something called purchase order in a sales process. So if a product has been sold, so we'll be getting the purchase order. Regarding sales process. So purchase order class describes an entire process, entire purchase order, and everything that you can do with the purchase order. So everything related to purchase order will be combined in a class. So this is just an example. So a class may contain variables and methods. So here we have seen internal, external, these are all variables. So a class can contain variables, then it can contain methods. Method is nothing but, so we'll be seeing them in detail before that. So here we are performing simple addition. So if you want to perform different operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, if you're going to perform all this in a single class, we'll be writing a method for a specific operation. So for addition, one method, then for subtraction, another method. So in a method will be written for a specific task. So like that, a class can have methods. So variables we have already seen. It is used to specify the state of an object. For example, we have something called the name, account type. So we'll be taking the related variables. So this is an example of a class, public class purchase order. Public is the access specifier. We have different access specifier, access modifier or access specifier. The first one is private. When you go for private, when you define a class as a private, the class can be accessed only within the, only for us, only it can be accessed only for a specific purpose. You can't call this class from other classes. So it declares that this class is only known locally. So it can't be called from any other classes or from any other Salesforce org. But when you define a class as public, this is visible in your entire application or a namespace. So when you define a class as public, this class can be called from other classes as well within the Salesforce org. But when you define the class as global, so when you are doing some integrations, third-party integrations and all, we have to define the class as global so that this class can be accessed by other organizations as well, other Salesforce org. So now first you need to define access modifier, then class, and then give a class name. So here I have taken purchase order, then write a method. So we'll see the methods in detail. So this is just a signature for a class. So when you take class, so here we have seen a class is a template from which objects are created. So what is an object? An object is an instance of a class. So here I have taken the class name as purchase order. So if I want to execute this class, so class name I have taken as public class name purchase order. This is the class name. Now here I have written some method, public void method 1. Now I want to execute this class. How to execute this class? If I want to execute this class, you first need to create an instance of this class. You need to create an object for this class. How to create an object? Class name, then give a variable name, then give new keyword. New is a keyword, then give the class name. This is how we will generate an object. So here obj is an object which is an instance of a purchase order class. Only when you are creating an instance of a class, you are ready to execute the class. So if you want to execute the class, you just need an object. An object can be created using the class name, then variable, new, then this we call it as constructor. We'll be seeing them constructor in detail. So before that, if object is nothing but an instance of a class. So if you want to execute a class, you first need to initialize object, instantiate an object. Object is an instance of a class. So here an instance of purchase order class is a specific purchase order that you send or receive. You may have multiple purchase orders in which purchase order you are going to work. That specifies the object. So before going for methods, let me explain the constructor. So here I have told, if you want to instantiate, you need a constructor. This part is the constructor. Constructor is nothing but it has the same name of the class name. So if you want to instantiate an object, you need a constructor. So here I have taken. So public class test object. Test object is the class name I have. Then public test object. It has the same name of the class name. Test object is the class name. When you are not providing any return type like a void, it will be taken as a constructor. It has the same name of the class name and it doesn't have any return type here. So if you want to execute this class, you need to create an object of the class. If you want to create an object, you need a constructor. So here you no need to specify this constructor part, public test object, more code here, this part. If you don't specify this part and you are executing this part, test object, you are initializing the class means this part will be automatically taken. You no need to explicitly mention this constructor part. Whenever you are creating an object, a constructor will be automatically invoked. So this is the default part. Constructor is a code that is invoked when an object is created from the class. It has the same name as its class. So here we have seen that's the same name of its class, test object, and it's similar to a method. Constructors have no return type. So here I didn't mention any return type like void, integer. So this is the constructor part. Now we are going to see method. So what is a method? So here I have told. So if I want to put it in a class, I have to put it inside a method. So methods are nothing but a collection of statements grouped together to perform a specific operation. So we'll see examples for. So we can have 4 different methods. The first one is without return type and without parameter. So here I have written a class, public class method example. Integer a equals 10, integer b equals 20. So a and b are the class variables or global variables. So because why we call it as global variable is I have defined it outside a method. So this is common for all the methods inside the class, inside this method example class. Hence we call it as global variable or class variable. Now I have written a method. Method signature is public. Then you need to mention some return type. Then method name. Then so here wait, this is not required. So here what I'm doing is inside the method, I'm just going to calculate the C value. C is nothing but A plus B. Then I'm going to display the C value. So here the value from the method, from this method, the value will be, C value will be calculated as 10 plus 20, so it's 30. So the method will be having C value as 30. Now, if you are going to use this C value in other methods or in other classes, then you need to use a keyword called return. Only when you use return C, when you are returning this particular C value, this value can be used in further classes or methods. So here the method format is without return type and without parameter. When you mention without return type, so here I have to take void, public void add. So the return type is nothing but the value you are returning. If you are going to return the C value is 30. 30 is an integer. So if you are going to return this value, then instead of void, you need to use integer. So whatever value you are returning, the corresponding data type should be taken here. So here the format is without return type and without parameter. Without return type means you're not going to return any value. So you have to take void as a return type here. That means it is not going to return any values. Then without parameter. So here I have already declared A and B value. If you are going to declare A and B value dynamically, that means at runtime you are going to provide values for A and B, then we will be passing A and B inside the parameter, inside the method name add. But here we have already defined, because it is without parameter, so I have already defined the value. This is going to be a static value. So here this is without return type and without parameter. So now we'll see another example.
Priya, Vaibhav again. One more question.
Yeah, Vaibhav.
When do we use return with return type and when do we use without return type? So you told me when I need a value, yes, but a real life example like the business application would be.
Okay, so here without return type and without parameter, right? So you have something called salary has been declared based on the experience I have already defined. Integer experience equals 5 I already defined. Then string city equals Bangalore I already defined. Based on these two values, I'm going to define salary. Suppose, so here we have already seen an example. So here the city is Hyderabad and experience is greater than 5. I'm going to define some value. So here, if someone is submitting an application form, so I don't know what's their experience or what's their city. So this is going to be provided by the end user. So when you want to get the values from the end user, you need to define it as with parameter. So you can't define a static text here, like integer a equals 10, b equals 20. You can't define string city equals Hyderabad or experience equals 5. You can't define it. It has to be provided by the end user. So you are going to take the values provided by the end user and then you are going to display. Got it?
Yeah, I
Then
got
you
it.
want,
So yeah,
okay,
I got it. So that is going to be okay without
with parameter.
with when okay, but that is with parameter, right? If end user is giving value, that is
Yes,
with parameter.
yes.
Okay, and when end user, so what is a business application? Why should I use void and why should I, like, in what instances in a business application
So for
void would be
example,
used and
so
when we
here I
use
have,
return?
okay, so here I have calculated the salary based on the values provided by the customer. Now, the salary, the same kind of operation, I mean, the values returned by this particular method, if I'm going to use the salary variable in another method, so here I have calculated the salary as 50,000. I have another method where if the salary is already defined in the method is 50,000, I'm going to define bonus. That is, I'm going to define in another method. So only if I get the value from previous method, I can define value for bonus in another method. So in that case, you have to get the value from one method. So you have to return the value. So if you want to return the value, you have to specify the corresponding data type here. The salary data type for salary is decimal. So instead of void, you have to specify the decimal here. So I have written 4 different methods. So I'll be explaining in detail them. So first we'll see how to execute this method.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So now, so here I'm going to create a class. How to create a class? Go to File, New, Apex class. So here name it as method example 1. See, this is a class signature. Public class name. So here what I'm going to do is integer a equals 10, integer b equals 20. Then I have written a method called public void, then add integer c equals a plus b. System dot debug c value is, then concatenate the variable. So here, since I'm not returning, so if you are going to use the c value in other methods or classes, then you have to return the c. If you are returning the c, so here the c variable is related to a data type called the integer. So here instead of void, you need to give integer data type. But here I'm not going to return. So just remove this part. Now Control S, save.
So most likely, I'm thinking, Priya, that we have to return. No, most likely, most common examples would be that we have to return a value because in a larger application.
Yes, exactly.
You
But
should.
this is here I'm just explaining what are the 4 types we have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So here if how to execute this class. Go to debug, open execute anonymous window. Whenever you want to execute a class, go to debug, open execute anonymous window. Here remove this part. Now to execute the class, you need to instantiate the class. That means an object for this class has to be created. To create an object for this class, take the class name, then put obj new, then constructor. Now an object for this class has been created. Now using this object, call the method. Now when you call this method, C value will be calculated and it will be displayed in the log. Now just click on execute. Click on debug only. See, the C value is 30. So this is how a static value will be calculated. So here we have taken without return type and without parameter. So we are not passing any parameter. We are not taking values from the end user. We have already defined the values and then we are calculating the C value based on these two values. Now the second type is without return type and with parameter. So here I'm going to take the values provided by the end user and then I'm going to calculate the C value. So file, new, Apex class, method, example 2. So here just take this part. So I'm going to calculate C value as A plus B. But A plus B will be provided by the end user. A and B values will be provided by the end user. So if the end user is providing values, then you need to add it in the parameter, add it as a parameter. So integer A, comma, integer B. Class name, void, method. Then if the end user is providing value, then add it as a parameter inside a method. Integer A, comma, integer B. Then click on save. File, save or control S. Now how to execute this class? Go to debug, open execute anonymous window. So here I have created an instance. Now using this instance, I'm going to call the method called add. So if I simply call the method, just click on execute. You will be facing an error. Method doesn't exist or incorrect signature. Void add from the type method example. So we don't have any method without parameter. We have a method with parameter. So you have to pass the parameter inside the method. So I'm going to pass 50, 70. So the C value will be calculated as 120. Now execute. Click on debug only. See, the C value is 120. Based on runtime, it is calculating the value based on the value provided by the end user. So this is the second type, without return type and with parameter. Then we have with return type and with parameter. So this is the most frequently used method, with return type with parameter. So file, new, Apex class, method, example 3. Public. So you are going to return C value. So if you are going to return C value, take integer as a return type. Add with return type. So provide integer A, comma, integer B. Then calculate the C value. Integer C equals A plus B. System.debug. C value is so if you are returning some value, if you are using return type, you have to return it. Return C. so that in other methods or classes, you can use the value returned by this method, C value. Now save. Oh, here I haven't. Now execute. Open, execute anonymous window. Method example 3. Just provide 60, 70. Now 130 will be displayed. Click on debug only. C value is 130. This is how with return type and with parameter works. So you need to take the values from the end user. So you should not, in general, will not be providing the static value here. But this can also be written based on the requirement. Then we have another format, last one. Method example 4. So here I'm going to take with return type and without parameter. So just copy the first thing. With return type, so here put integer, then return C. With return type, without parameter. With return type, so I have taken integer here, returning C here. Without parameter, so I have already declared the values for A and B. Now click on save. Now go to debug, open execute anonymous window. So here I'm providing values. If I try to execute, I'll get error because we don't have such method with parameter we don't have. So remove these values. Just execute, the value will be calculated as 30. Click on debug only. C value was 30. So in general, we'll be going for with return type. With return type with parameter. Any doubts? So far, if you want to execute a class or a method, you have to instantiate a class. So here we have seen, you have to create an object of the class and then you have to call a method. Instead of this one, we have a concept called static. So here I have taken public class static example, then public. Before the return type, I have taken a keyword called static. Static boolean test, then integer a, b. Then if the a is greater than b, then c value will be true. Then I am returning some value. So what is the difference between this one and the previous one? When I define a method as a static, you no need to instantiate a class. Without instantiating a class, you can directly call a method by class name dot method name. So in general, in our real-time projects, we'll be going for static. So when you define a method as static, you no need to instantiate a class and call the method with a reference variable. You can directly call the method with class name dot method name. So we'll see example for that.
So is this a general practice? Is this a general practice and they go by static? Yes. I think that is more convenient, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So here public. So normal, I'll before taking the static, we'll write the class and then we'll test it. Integer a equals 100. Integer b equals 200. Now integer, boolean only we are going to take. Boolean c equals a greater than b. So if a is greater than b, then c value will be true, otherwise it's going to be false. System dot debug c value is plus c. Then since you have taken the return type as boolean, you have to return the value here. Return c. Now save it. So the c value will be returned as false because 100 greater than 200 is false. Now how to execute this class? Take the static example. Se new static example. Now take the reference variable and then call the method. Now just highlight this part and click on execute highlighter. So the C value will be calculated as false. On debug only, see the C value is false. So here this is a normal method. Now I'm going to convert it into a static method. So if you want to convert before the return type, use this keyword called static. Now click on save. I'm going to execute the same class, so same highlighted class only, but if you try to execute this one, you will get error. Static method cannot be referenced from a non-static context. So this is a static method. So this procedure will be used to execute a non-static method. So then how to execute the static method? You don't need to instantiate the class. Directly take the class name dot method name. Now highlight this part, then click on execute highlighter. Click on debug only. So the C value is false. So in real time, we'll be going for static methods. Any doubts? So we have seen MVC architecture, how a model, view and controller are connected one to other. Then we have seen a normal statement, data types, primitive and S-object data types we have seen. We have seen identifiers, variables, operators, constants, separators, keywords. Then using system.debug, how to print the data, how to print dynamic data also we have seen. Then if-else statement, then class, object, access modifier, method, constructor, static example we have seen. So that's all for today's session. Let me know if you have any doubt, we'll discuss.